So the DRS, when you think about where it sits in the LMG class, it's really a liar. This is an assault rifle lying about being an LMG. It is totally not an LMG, but the thing is fantastic. It's really designed around a play class where you're going to be attacking objectives. You want to feel like you're an assault class, but you want to play with the benefits of the support class gadgets, like the ammo bag, all that sort of fun stuff to it, right? And also note that because the aim down sight it's pretty fast, not quite as fast as some of the assault rifles, the fact that you are playing in the support class gives you a little bit of a bonus to that aim down sight. It really is going to feel like a fantastic gun. It's got very little recoil, and what I'm going to do now is help you think about ways you can build the gun. What's hard about this gun is there are so many attachments. I don't use the vast majority of them because I don't think they're quite needed. It's like some of these stubby grips, like you can make a case that you want to be able to get to the transition to aim down sights, but for the point cost that you're putting in there compared to if you play it with the support class, I don't find myself gaining much benefit out of there. I also don't use the hand stop. There's not a real reason for me to be mounting the gun anywhere. So more often than not, people are running for the actual angled grips or just pure recoil control with those grips. But all that being said, there are so many different options, fungible ammo, synthetic ammo, all that sort of stuff, right? There's a case you can say, oh, I want to try to use this synthetic tip so I'll pull a lot of headshots off. But the point cost is so great and there's so many pieces of the gun you want to try to accentuate with some of the points that you have available to you. So let me dive into a little bit about the different grips, the different barrels, and the different muzzles you can use to really make this gun shine. All right, so let's take a quick look at the different recoil patterns based on which grip you're using. So here's a recoil pattern with no grip, then we have a slight reduction to recoil, and then moderate, significant, and great. And so if you kind of zoom out and look at it, like, yeah, it does help the recoil pattern quite a bit to get down to great, but it seems like as long as you get past slight, when you get to the moderate recoil control, when you get to, great and significant, it doesn't seem to pay off quite as much in terms of the point cost. So it looks like as long as you're getting that moderate level recoil control from your grip, that seems to be a good balance between the amount of points you're spending to get that moderate recoil control versus the actual benefit that it's playing out compared to the greatly reduced to it. Greatly reduced would be useful, but there's a lot of point cost to it, and there's so many other things on the DRS that you're going on to upgrade. So here's a quick look at the different barrels on the DRS to see a little bit of how they're handling the recoil from the base barrel all the way up to the short and the light barrel. In terms of recoil pattern, it really looks like the second one, which is the heavy and the heavy extended, because as they say in their description, they do help us a bit with our recoil control. Overall, these first four barrels don't seem to play like a ton in terms of recoil, but when you see like the short and the light barrel, notice that you've got very little recoil control. So if you're going to end up using the short or the light barrel, you're going to want to make sure that you grab some recoil control somewhere else, such as with using a different muzzle or one of the grips inside of itself. All right, so let's do a quick little comparison of the various muzzles you can use, or really the muzzles that are worth using on the DRS. Here's our base muzzle pattern to it. Then we start talking about like the linear comp and the ported brake, and then, sorry, this is the linear comp that makes it a giant vertical line. It's got a whole lot of kick to it versus the basic two brakes. They definitely provide a little bit of help, but not like a ton of help. And then we're going to go over to our four suppressors, like the lighten suppressor on the end. We've got the CBQ, we've got the long, and then the standard suppressor. In terms of overall build, there are so many places you want to use some points inside of here. You can definitely stay away from the linear comp. It does make the pattern a little more vertical, but it's still got a whole lot of kick to it. As opposed to the brakes, they definitely help keep the pattern tighter, but compared to the base pattern, I don't know if it's worth just a little bit of points you're going to get. It almost looks better to jump up to some of the silencers. This is the long suppressor on there. It introduces some weapon sway, so if you're going to want to go after enemies a little bit further away, I would say steer away from that. The CBQ has no recoil control, and it's an increased amount of points. I'm not sure if it's worth it. When you compare the the suppressors, like the base suppressor compared to the lightened suppressor, I don't know if there's a ton of difference between the two of them. So if you need to save on some points, you can say, well, I'm going to get some recoil control somewhere else. And with such a short clip, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to save some points and grab the standard suppressor. So just a little bit of a comparison of the various ways you can think about it. If you need recoil control, those two brakes seem to do fairly well. If you need some suppression, then maybe just grabbing the standard suppressor is definitely a way to go, or jumping up to the lightened suppressor. Everything else introduces some funky things that you now have to compensate for in other attachments that you may not want to spend your points on. All right, now that you've seen some of the different grips, barrels, muzzles, etc. you can put on it, let's do a little bit of comparison about some various builds. The current thinking so far for the DRS is looking at something like the lightened suppressor, trying to get the extra bullet velocity out of the heavy extended barrel, and then dropping down to like the full angled grip. That's going to give you a pretty solid performance in terms of the muzzle velocity. Your ADS, your aim down sight time's like a little bit slow, but not terrible. You do have a little bit of extra. Again, you definitely want to have the 30 fast because you have a limited number of bullets. You're going to be reloading quite a bit. You could opt to say, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and put on the rail cover, at least to help a little bit since you have some spare points to it, but totally optional for you. Let me go to the firing range and show you that's what this recoil pattern looks like. So pretty solid recoil pattern for it, right? Real tight, real easy to make sure you can hit a lot of different targets for it. Another build we could choose would be like a full recoil build. In this build, we're going to trade the suppressor out for the compensated brake. We're going to keep the same exact barrel, the heavy extended barrel, and then we are going to use the classic vertical. So now we're using a great reduction to recoil. And I also put on the rail cover, and then we still have our 30 fast for the magazine. And so if we go into the firing range, that's what this second pattern is. And so if you get up close, you'll notice the full recoil control, yeah, it definitely helps, but you're trading off the fact that everybody can now see you and hear you, right? You're up close and personal for it. So you're gonna have to really consider whether that amount of recoil control is really necessary compared to getting it with a little bit of the work with the silenced help. Now, if you want to do kind of this full recoil control builds, right, let's go ahead and just drop our rail cover off here, and then we could jump from the brake to get the lightened suppressor. So in this case, we're going to run the lightened suppressor, we're running the heavy extended barrel, and we're running the classic vertical grip. We're not going to be dancing and bobbing and weaving all around. And if you want to see what that firing pattern looks like, that is this one. So to me, if you feel like you need a little more recoil control as opposed to the current, what we think the best build is, you're welcome to do this kind of build. I think it helps a little bit, especially with some of these opening shots, but I don't know if it's really that beneficial. I do want to give a bit of a nod to the blue laser side. If you feel like you're bobbing and weaving a lot and want to put a blue laser on, you're sacrificing somewhere around your recoil control. And so this is the kind of the pattern you end up with, even with the best recoil control grip and barrel available to you while still using a silencer to keep yourself off the radar. I think the silencer is pretty key in this particular build because you tend to be attacking. You're up close and personal with folks, so the fewer enemies that you can fight at one time is beneficial to you because you're going to have to do a little bit of reloading. So I would say you might want to just stick with where everybody tends to be at, right? The full angled grip, the lightened suppressor, and then the heavy extended barrel. That's going to give you kind of a pretty good balance to the way you want to be able to roll with this gun. But feel free, if you're not going to be worried about trying to hit some of those longer range targets and you're losing some of that aim down sights, you definitely can go to a different barrel to help you with it. For example, just roll back to the basic barrel. You're not going to get the same bullet velocity, but your aim down sight time gets a little bit faster. Now you're entering to that range where you're competitive to most of the assault rifle aim down sights time. So a couple things you consider for the current meta build for the DRS. In terms of what I tend to run with, I tend to run something more like this, where I do have some of that recoil control. I like that aim down sight speed because I need every bit of help I can get with the reaction time that I have, and then I usually slap on the rail cover, right? But definitely keep that 30 fast because I tend to reload quite a bit. So hope that helps you understand a couple of different ways to build the DRS.